So the population in Texas is expanding dramatically. You have businesses moving here, you have families moving here, you have people who are retiring from higher cost states moving here. And so you're adding additional people by the millions year after year, yet you have the grid that was built 50 years ago, 60 years ago, 100 years ago in some parts of Texas for that population at that time.
Hi everyone, Joe Ordia here for Solar Surge. And for the past 9 years, I've been helping families achieve energy independence using clean, renewable energy. Now, in today's program, we have a special guest for you. His name is Will Arvance from All Solar Texas. And today we're going to be talking about the state of the solar industry in Texas specifically. So Will, tell me, just for those that don't know you, how did you first get started in solar, and what are you doing now specifically at All Texas Solar or All Solar Texas?
Yeah, so first off, a little bit of background on me, Joe. My background is in the utility industry. I worked for the utility for almost 12 years. I started in field construction, kind of being a field guy and overseeing construction crews. And I got into project management, and then ultimately I ended up getting involved in rate setting and rate case writing and writing all of the inputs that go to the Public Utilities Commission that ultimately ends up impacting customers downstream from rate increases. And I ended up managing a portfolio of electric work. The last body of portfolio of work that I had in my portfolio was microgrids. And as I continued to see the problems with the utility, the continued escalations that were going up much quicker than inflation, and we really couldn't justify it, and having a lot of the loose assumptions that went into these types of rate making processes, knowing that we're leaving customers in the dark still, knowing that customers are not getting the value out of the product, right? This is one of the few products on the utility side where you as a customer will pay more and get less value, because the grid becomes less reliable. It's like you would never tolerate that in a normal market with a commodity. You would expect to pay less, not more. If that product doesn't give you more value, you wouldn't expect to pay more for it. And so that really kind of triggered this distaste for the utility and kind of how that was structured. And as I started to get into microgrids, I was like, why don't we do this everywhere? Like, we don't even need the utility anymore. At the end of the day, looking at it holistically, if we were to really build microgrids and focus on renewable energy and backup storage. Like, we have the technology, it's now affordable. So why are we not doing this? And then when the snowpocalypse, whatever you want to call it, in Texas back in February last year happened, people died. Real people with brothers and sisters and family. They died because their utility failed them. And that's when I had a crisis of conscience. I was making really good money. I was set. I had a pension, 401k, great benefits. And I said, I can't do this anymore. So I'm going to go all in with solar. So we started the company right after snowpocalypse last year. We've been kind of scaling as we've been growing. It started probably much like you did, where it's you and taking all the calls. But we ended up building a pretty solid team now. So we have a really great team. We market across Texas, but we are based in College Station, but we work in some of the major markets.
Great. Now tell me, how has YouTube and how has the YouTube strategy worked with All Solar Texas? Because I understand you're putting out a lot of great information as well. And by the way, guys, if you haven't taken a look at his channel, make sure you look at Will's channel, All Solar Texas. And I guess let's start with the YouTube strategy first. So how do you use YouTube to better inform potential solar homeowners in Texas?
So our entire strategy was, I think, based on how I do things, right? If I'm looking at a new product, I want to buy a new vehicle, I want to buy a new radio, start reading reviews, product information. I'll check out what people have to say. I'll get educated on the product, know the pros, the cons. And I started to think, well, if that's how I look for products, why wouldn't that be, any different with solar, And so I looked at YouTube as the platform to say, okay, I want education. I don't want to be sold. I just want education. I want facts. I want people's experience. And I thought, well, let's just start there, because in my industry, when I was with the utility, we were very aware of the type of predatory tactics that these solar people would use. And so I knew I was not going to be a door-to-door guy. I've never knocked on a single door since starting this company. None of my people have knocked on a single door, because I figured I don't like people coming to my house unannounced. If I want to research a product, I go online and then I'll make a selection. I'll find a qualified vendor and I'll go under contract after reaching out to them. So I thought, let's start there. Let's start with just educating the YouTube community on what is true about solar, what's true about the utilities, take that insider knowledge, that years of experience that I had, and just translate that in terms that people can understand, because they know they're paying more, but they don't know why. And they know that their bills go way high and then drop down and then get high again, but they don't understand what is involved. They know their power's going out from time to time. They know that ERCOT's asking them to conserve power, but they don't know why. So I thought, let's just start by educating people. And so our very first, episode, I think we published last year, and of course, no traffic, right? But it was just, okay, let's go to the next topic and the next topic. Then people started to watch some of these videos and really get educated. And then they were reaching out to me saying, thank you for just giving me real information. Thank you for providing me with actual value and not trying to sell me. And I said, yep, at the end of the day, I'm not going to sell you a product. I think the product is going to sell itself if it works for you. And so we've had a lot of success with YouTube.
That's great. That's great. And I think there's something to that, in terms of reciprocity. If you can legitimately provide valuable information and education to a potential client, that client, whenever they are ready to actually engage with vendors or get quotes, they're going to feel comfortable and almost even feel compelled to want to at least give you an opportunity, because you have provided that value up front. A big part of why we took the approach we did on Solar Surge is because of some of the things you just mentioned. It was, I saw a lot of the sales guys came in from other industries, like door-to-door alarm sales, door-to-door cable subscription sales, automotive sales, and they brought with them all these sort of cheap and unprofessional, and in some cases unethical sales practices, and it really kind of cheapened the industry. When I started in solar, it was mainly solar enthusiasts. Some of them were more on the prepper side, like myself. Some of them were more like on the environmental side, but it was like people that had a legitimate interest in solar. Now I think it's flooded with guys that are just in it to make a quick buck, and they're attracted to solar because of the commission potential, not necessarily actually helping the homeowner achieve a certain goal. So that's when I said, hey, we're going to have to do something totally different. So that's our YouTube strategy, was all about education first, educate the homeowner as much as possible. Whenever it is they're ready to go shopping, great, they can click a button and talk to you. But we're willing to provide the education and the information for free, as opposed to some of these other organizations. They're just trying to kind of weasel their way into your living room and then deliver this high pressure sales pitch. And a lot of times homeowners don't even understand what they're signing up for. And so I think we've been able to accomplish that to some extent in actually helping homeowners understand what are some of the options and what are some of the pros and cons of each. Because a lot of times, whether it's between SolarEdge and Enphase, or if you're looking at a battery backup, there's a number of different brands and types of battery backup out there. So we just kind of want to be that place that the consumer can go to if they have questions and trying to make sense of all of that. So
we take that similar approach. So my team members are not called sales reps. They're called project developers, because that's really what they are. Solar is a construction project at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. And so my folks are trained on the ethics and the integrity first, then they're trained on the product second, and then they're trained on the strategy third, and then they're trained on how to engage with the customer. Because if that customer gets the sense that you don't really know what you're talking about, like, you've lost the customer. And if the customer doesn't get the sense that you want to understand them and their family dynamics, and you're just trying to get a product on the roof as quickly as possible, not really factoring in their plans for future expansion or upgrades of gas over to electric appliances, or factoring in the age of their children and their consumption, or any plans for electric vehicles that they want to buy in the near future, then you're going to be putting that product on the roof, and it's not going to ultimately end up giving them their desired energy goal, right? It's not going to meet the need because they're going to be back in power bills in 3 years, right? Or 5 years.
Right, right. But Will, with your background, and this is really unique because I don't think I've really met anybody else like you that has that kind of depth of experience on the utility side of things, and then making the jump into solar. Myself, I came up as an electrician contractor, so I was I was installing solar, and then now I've gotten into more of the sales and marketing side of the business. But so tell me, how do people respond to that when you're able to speak from that depth of experience on the utility side, knowing how they work, and then bringing that into the equation of helping a homeowner decide how to go solar?
I really find it to be an advantage. First off, people are curious. And when they normally would reach out to a solar company, you're not going to get that experience. So you're only getting one side of the story. You're getting the solution, but not the real problem. Or you're getting the problem presented in a way that's really not the case. It's not factual. It's not based in the reality of things. It's based on what people assume must be happening. So when I bring that experience in, plus I layer in the ethics of it, because I did leave the utility because of the kind of ethical dilemma that I had, kind of going on in my heart and in my head. And being a man of faith, it took a lot of prayer to determine whether or not this was the right move, because I have a family and I was walking away from a very stable, very resilient job, that great benefits, a great pay, but I couldn't stomach it anymore. And so that connects with customers, because everybody's been at that place where they just couldn't do something anymore, right? And they're all curious about how this very large grid functions and works.
Why do you think solar is so hot right now, particularly in Texas? I mean, Texas does have a unique climate and the deregulated electric grid, but why do you think solar in Texas right now is taking off?
So I'll first start by saying that has not always been the understanding. When I told people that I was leaving the utility to go into the solar industry, they thought I was crazy, because Texas has some of the lowest electric rates in the country. It's not like California or Arizona or on the East Coast. So the value proposition isn't there. In California, the payback period is only 4 or 5 years. And so the return on investment is substantial, because those rates are almost 40 cents per kilowatt hour. Here in Texas, you're looking at 8-9 cents per kilowatt hour. But what I told people is, I use this analogy. I said, when did Noah build the ark? Before the flood, right? He didn't wait for it to start raining and pouring to start building, because it takes time. But I saw the flood coming. I knew certain things were true, and I was studying the demographics and looking at the actual data. So the population in Texas is expanding dramatically. You have businesses moving here. You have families moving here. You have people who are retiring from higher cost states moving here. And so you're adding additional people by the millions year after year, yet you have the grid that was built 50 years ago, 60 years ago, 100 years ago in some parts of Texas for that population at that time. So you really have a supply and demand issue. And then Texas not being connected to the other grids means that we have also a generation issue. So I was watching all of these dynamics, people moving, businesses. I knew that there was going to be a substantial load and a continued load that was going to get greater, not lesser. And we had more complicated weather conditions. Hurricane Harvey, as an example, Snowmageddon from last year. We also see record high heat waves this summer. So I knew that the weather conditions weren't getting more sensitive to the grid, right? They're getting worse. More people putting demand on the grid wasn't going to alleviate the pressure. So I knew things would start breaking. And when things start breaking, then the utilities had to fix it. And it cost them millions of dollars, capital expense, years of rate making to set those rates so that they can make the types of long-term capital investments that they need to make the grid more resilient. But there's not enough time. It's going to take them 10, 15 years to make the type of investments in the grid to make it more reliable for today's population. Meanwhile, people are going to continue to move here. So I just looked at that as an opportunity to free people up from the grid unreliability, free people up from the cascading costs that are guaranteed to come down to them because of the fact that they have to pay for all that capital investment. And that's going to come at the cost of the customer.
Absolutely, absolutely, and of course, right after the snowpocalypse event, that's when a number of these, sort of reactionary measures were put into place. But the way to pay for all that is ratepayers are going to be paying a higher rate. Now, I'm curious because I've worked with a number of homeowners in Texas as well, and I've heard dozens of stories of what it was like going through that event with the deep freeze last year. I'm curious of the projects that you're doing now. How many are doing solar with battery backup for protection against a grid outage versus how many are just doing straight solar for the savings benefit?
Great question. I'll phrase that a little bit differently if you don't mind. How many customers are going with the backup power option versus straight solar, right? Because batteries are one option. So I'll break it down this way. I'd say about 75% of our customers opt to go with some type of backup option. Then we start by comparing batteries versus generators. What's their energy goal? Is it to be able to power their whole house, or just to provide some standard backup for lights, internet, TV, etc.? Then we go through the value proposition of what's the cost of batteries versus generators? What's the capacity between the two? How many amps can you get between the two? So I'd say by and large, 75% of customers are opting for backup power. Of that group, probably about 30% are opting for batteries. And those are the folks that recognize that there is a additional cost for batteries. And so they're not after the value proposition of a certain kilowatt hour, right? Because they know once they start to add batteries, especially if they have to add multiple batteries, then that's going to drive their base price per kilowatt hour up. And it may not actually make financial sense if you're comparing what they're currently paying in rates to what their system's going to cost. But they do it for an entirely different reason. For them, it's an insurance policy. Just like we purchase insurance to provide us with that level of security in the event that something drastic or dramatic happens, that's what they're after. And then there's a whole off-grid market here. Texans are very independent. They don't like relying on the other, and the other could look like the utility or the government or the regulators, right? The Public Utility Commission, to fix these problems. So they know that these problems are not going to be fixed by the powers that be. They would much rather make the investment and own their own power, claim their energy independence by going completely off grid. So we definitely see a rise in that market as well.
That's great. That's great. I was just looking at the numbers for Solar Surge as a whole, and it was a dead 50-50 split of those that choose to do emergency backup versus just solar. And I thought I was high. So that's interesting. So a majority of your clients choose some sort of an emergency backup option, whether it's traditional generator or solar batteries.
Well, we're in a different age, right? Before snowpocalypse, it wasn't a big product that was in demand. And now you look at that one event in time that people remember. There's an emotional connection because they were put in a situation where they were out for 2 weeks in some cases, 1 week. They know people that lost thousands of dollars in beef, right? In Texas, it's not uncommon to slaughter an entire cow and put it in your freezer. And it's a $1,200 investment in beef that you have in your freezer that if goes bad, you're out all of that investment. And you have homes that are on water well pumps, where if they're not powered, you don't get clean, fresh water, right? So there is a dynamic in Texas that I think is unique, that is driving the need and the desire for a backup power option more than what you may see in other states.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. Now, what about more from a policy perspective? What are some of the things that you're seeing on the horizon in terms of solar policy in Texas? Do most places have net metering now, and do you see that trend continuing?
So what we see is a hodgepodge of programs. So you have the deregulated parts of the state, which is a pretty large part of the state, roughly 70% of the state's deregulated. So you have these buyback programs that are in place. And I've seen some changes in just those plans, where it used to be there were no caps on the types of systems you could build. And then it went down to a 50 kW cap. Now it's at a 25 kW cap. So they're starting to play a little bit with the cost of the import, the export, with your buyback ratios to where it's not as advantageous for the customer now that more people are getting involved. But on the municipality side, with your city utilities and with your electric co-ops, it's all over the board. We have one utility here in Bryan, BTU, where they will credit you 3 cents per kilowatt hour for your overproduction, and they will use that to offset even the other costs of your utilities with the city: sewer, solid waste, garbage, water. And then you have co-ops, some with very good plans where they will buy it back at not just the wholesale rate, but they'll buy it back at maybe 6 cents per kilowatt hour. And then they do provide net metering with a rollover, and then they'll pay you out whatever your extra credits are at the end of the calendar year. But we have several co-ops where it is not a benefit to go solar. And I will tell customers what they can expect to pay, because the utility has a high base monthly meter charge just for being connected to the grid. Could be $35, right? So in addition to your solar payment, you now have a $35 charge. Also, some of these co-ops will not roll over any credits. You don't have any net metering, and all of the export power that you push back to the grid, they don't compensate you for in any way. So you're essentially giving them free power that they'll sell to your neighbor at full retail price. So with those customers, I'm not building them to 100 or 110% offset. I'm building them to a 75% offset with a battery, so that they're not having to incur that demand charge on top of their meter charge, on top of losing any extra output that they have. So it's really all over the place in Texas.
Sure. I know it's one of the most challenging markets because of the deregulation and the I guess hundreds of choices of different retail energy providers. Who would you say, if you had to pick your top three retail energy providers, who would you say your top three in terms of a solar friendly program?
So where I live in Texas has always been in a regulated space. So I always preface this by simply saying I've never lived in a deregulated space. So this is just coming from customers, what I gather from my team members that live in deregulated parts of the state. Pulse has a really great buyback plan right now. Pulse will give you a 1-to-1 credit. So for the cost of the import, which is what they're charging you to use that power, they will pay you that same amount in price per kilowatt hour for the export. So it's that 1-to-1, and they don't have caps. And it's a pretty solid program. They have maybe a 12, 24-month term, very low termination fees, and a very low base monthly charge. So we get a lot of positive feedback about Pulse. We also like Octopus as well as Champion. So those are the top three that I'm seeing are very popular right now with my customers.
That's great. Okay. And are there any places in Texas where you would not advise folks to go solar? Or do you take it each on a case-by-case basis?
I would say generally it is case by case. And that really has to do with the fact that everybody lives in a different part of Texas where there's different incentive programs available. There's different, ways that the utility treats the extra power that you produce and push back to the grid. But I would say there are certain parts of Texas where it's not yet affordable enough, and that could be because there's not enough players in the space to help make those prices more competitive for solar. We largely see that in West Texas. If you go out to Midland, Odessa, Lubbock, Lubbock is a great example. I was working with a customer there, and his utility is not friendly to solar. Basically, if you are overproducing, they keep it. There's no credits, there's no rollovers, there's no rebates. The only thing they have going for them is the federal tax credit. And that's basically it. And then on top of that, because of how the market is, you don't get the added benefits of solar, like having that investment add additional home value to your home, because the market there doesn't recognize solar as an asset, as an added value to the home. So if you go and you put that investment into your home, and then you decide to sell your home in 5 or 7 years, you won't get your money back. And in many cases in that part of Texas, people will prefer that you take the panels off before they purchase your house. That is mind-blowing, that people would look at a home and pay the market rate for a home, but they'll only buy it if the owner removes the solar panels. That just shows you that we have an education gap in the Texas market, but also we have utilities that have not yet caught up to the benefits that they can also have when residential customers, commercial customers invest in solar and help offset some of that demand and pressure that's on their own utility grid.
Right, right. Well, I think that's again why we're out here talking about it and getting this information out for homeowners. I think there is kind of a misconception out there that solar is just for, you know, kind of environmentalists and people that are, you know, Greenpeace and that sort of thing. You know, it's actually not that at all in my experience. You know, most of the solar I do are in what you'd probably call red states or conservative states. And it's a lot of folks look at it as a way that they can be less dependent on the grid, less dependent on the government, as you mentioned, and just to take control of a big part of their lives, which is their energy situation. You know, energy is a big part of our lives. I'm also in an area where I'm on an independent well and septic system. So if we lose power, we can't flush the toilet. You know, that's a big deal. And so, you know, having the solar, having battery storage for somebody like me gives me that peace of mind that I can be more self-sufficient. And if the power company goes down, I'm not going to be totally down.
I grew up on a ranch. It sounds like you have a very similar experience where we had water wells, and those water wells would stop running if we had an outage. And living on a ranch, you learn to be resilient. You learn to be self-sufficient. What I found about this product is apolitical, right? You can have people all along the political spectrum. Let's just say it's folks like my dad, the right-winger, the prepper, right? Hardcore. I don't want to rely on the government. I don't want to rely on the utilities, right? I don't want to rely on anybody. You know, give me that product so that I could be completely self-reliant. And they're my off-grid crowd, right? And then on the complete left-hand side, you have people that want to reduce their carbon footprint as much as possible. And I'm working with customers that are making dramatic changes in how they live because of their commitment to decarbonizing their own footprint. So one customer purchased some C-Train containers, and he's creating a modular home and purchased very expensive toilets that incinerate the human waste so that he's not wasting water. And we built him a carport, put the solar panels on top of that, coupled that with a backup battery source. But we're also designing that system for rainwater harvesting so that he could collect water and then not have to demand so much water from the, you know, because this person kind of lives way out there. And so it's quite the trip to go in for water. Plus, you know, we're in a drought. And so you have people on both ends of the political spectrum and everybody in between, which is why I think this product's so unique. It is apolitical. It has nothing to do with whether or not you're blue or red or you're a Democrat. I think that is just a misconception about this product that does hurt solar in Texas, to be honest with you, because they see it as a particular administration's push versus looking at it in a different way, which is, it's good for me because I could save money, or it's good for me because I could create more resilience and energy independence. So we're trying to change the narrative.
Absolutely. I think you're right. If you think about it, guys, this is one of the only products out there where the government will actually give you a subsidy to help you become less dependent on government. So they're literally paying you to become more energy independent. And for me, that's the only deal I can think of that I've been able to take advantage. And yeah, so I think you hit the nail on the head. We have to change the narrative. We have to change the discussion, and that's why we're having this discussion. And you know, I'll be sharing this on the Solar Surge channel. Hopefully, you'll share this on your channel as well. And really just keeping that discussion going and making sure that potential homeowners and frankly potential solar professionals as well, you know, really understand what it is that they're offering and what's available now.
Yeah, I think that's where we have to step in and change the dynamic of the discussion and change it from being a left versus right, a blue versus red, and get it back to what the product actually can do and what it could offer for the individual customer. Meanwhile, we're fighting two battles: the misinformation battle of solar being a particular product that a certain political party endorses and one doesn't. But we're also fighting the other battle, which is the misinformation battle from a predatory solar sales industry. There is a lot of room to improve in that area, and we are engaging in our customers locally and throughout the broader Texas, state, just to provide people with the information that they need to protect themselves. Because I get heartbreaking calls every week, and that's not an exaggeration. I get heartbreaking emails every week where someone did not know they were signing a contract, but they were duped into it, or they were taken advantage of in some other way, or their system isn't producing like the solar sales guy said it was. So that's what I really like about the Solar Surge channel and the Solar Surge community. Folks, I could tell you, Joe's the real deal. I'm in this industry with him. In fact, in this particular market, you could consider us competitors, but I don't. I consider him a partner. I always encourage people to get other proposals and to really understand what their options are. And Joe's operating in a very difficult market here in Texas because he has all of those challenges. But I could assure you that his product, his services, these are the types of groups that we need here in Texas, supporting solar as a product and helping to protect customers from the types of predatory tactics that are all too commonly found out there in the market.
Yep, absolutely. And I think, not even thinking about in terms of competition, but we're partners in this industry and in growing the industry and in, as you said, growing awareness of what this industry really is about and what's true and what's possible and what's not possible. And how to avoid pitfalls. I think you're absolutely right. I've heard, maybe not as many as you, but I've heard several stories about somebody signed up for solar, salesperson didn't tell them that without a battery backup, they're not going to have any emergency power if the grid goes down, or they got overcharged and they got price gouged, and now their solar loan payment is $100 higher than what their electric bill savings is. And you just hear all sorts of that stuff. And I think a lot of it is just short-sightedness. There are salespeople in this industry that they believe that they can sell one project and rip a $10,000 commission and then go on vacation for the month, and that's okay to do business that way. And don't get me wrong, I mean, some projects are large enough to justify that kind of a sales compensation, but most of them are not. Most of them are not. Most people should be happy with some, 5, 6, 7% net commission, and you move on to the next product, and you get to your sales goal by helping more people, not by ripping a few people off that didn't realize what they were signing.
Right. It's all about volume. And that's really what we're looking at. Is solar is not a product that you're in and you're out and then you cut your ties and you're gone. You're on to the next customer. It's a relationship, especially with warranties. I'm always encouraging my customers, with our warranty, that is, a product that I want you to engage with me on. I will pick up the phone call, or one of my team members, if you're one of their customers, right? You will be dealing with people that you worked with initially. And then even if there was a change and team members moved on or moved into different roles in the company, we're here for you because we see it as a long-term relationship. It's not a get in, get out type of situation. That's what you're seeing all too often across the industry. It really is this lack of respect for the customer, not seeing this as an actual investment that's a 30-year product that's going to be on that customer's roof, and then understanding that there's also a relationship that accompanies that product. And so I would definitely agree with you, Joe, that there are certain projects that may, from a compensation standpoint, it may demand a higher commission, but I'm thinking, at least in my experience, that's more on these very tricky projects where there's a lot of risk. And so what I really call a lot of that is contingency. There's some very complicated projects because at the end of the day, it is a construction project. And so, I work with the customer to say, we're building in some contingency because I never want to go back to you to ask more money. I'd much rather say, hey, we didn't use this contingency. Now we're doing a change order and we're giving you some money back. That's always the approach that we take, is sitting down with the customer, understanding what the whole picture is, what are those base costs that they could expect to pay, and then at the end, producing a product that really is going to last their time in that home or 30 years and beyond.
All right. Well, Will, I know we're just about out of time now. Folks, again, the YouTube channel is All Solar Texas. You can find them on the web, also All Solar Texas. Well, folks, as always, if you're getting good value from the information that we have here on Solar Surge, be sure to click on the like button. And also consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already. We're trying to get videos just like this one out for you guys every week, hopefully multiple videos per week, to make sure that you have the best up-to-date solar market information. Of course, if you're in the process of looking at solar power options for your home, if you need to get a price quote, or if you already have quotes and you just need to get a comparison quote to make sure you're getting a good deal, as always, feel free to reach out to us on the link below there. It'll just take you to our website where you can schedule a short Zoom meeting with one of our experts here and talk about your unique goals for the solar project. Well, folks, I thank you again for tuning in to Solar Surge today. As always, I'm Joe Ordia, encouraging you to get prepared and be empowered. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next video.